Hello, and welcome to Social Justice Talks. We really wanted to keep our conversation around race going. We asked our student athletes to submit their race-based questions so that our social justice committee can answer them. We're very excited to be here today, and I'm gonna let the ladies introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Avadni. I'm on the women's soccer team and I'm president of the Social Justice Committee.
Hi, my name's Adora and I'm on the track and field team.
Hi, and I'm Andrea. I'm on the track and field team as well.
Avani, as president, can you tell us a little bit more about the committee?
Yes, so our committee, following a lot of racial conflict that was going on in the country, we decided that we wanted to make sure that our athletic department and university were unified and inclusive. And so we decided to create this committee, and over the course of the fall, we were able to do a few events, and unfortunately because of COVID, we weren't able to do as much as we'd like. We were able to do a unity demonstration with the chalk event, which brought all of athletics together in a really cool way. And now we kind of broke up our committee into several different committees that include race and ethnicity, as well as law enforcement, gender, community service and outreach, mental health, and
LGBTQ plus.
thank you. But yeah.
All right, well, thanks for that. Let's go ahead and just dive in with our questions. You ready? When was the first time you became aware of race?
Well, I grew up in a very white area in England. When I went to primary school, there was maybe one or two other people of color at my school. And then when I went to secondary school in the city as well, it was the same thing. I was one of maybe three other people in my school that were people of color. So when I was much younger, I think one of the earliest sort of things that differentiated me from my friends was my hair. There was no one in the area that could do my hair. My mum's white, and so she had to learn how to deal with afro hair because I had this huge afro. I was born with this huge afro. And all my friends had straight, Caucasian, very easy to manage hair. So that, like, just looking at school pictures from when I was younger, that's the immediate thing that sort of made me stick out from everybody else, like all my friends. So I think that was my first, like, time where I came to terms with it.
Mine was pretty similar in that way. And at times it was a little bit more like a lot of racial things would happen. Like in my neighborhood, me and my brothers were the only black people in the neighborhood, because like our father lived in Jamaica, and we just grew up with my mom, who is white, and she didn't really know how to teach me how to do my hair. And I still am working on learning how to do my hair. And I think that I probably would say like one of the first experiences I had was when I was really young, that we had a neighbor that came up to my dad when he was living with us in the US, and she said that she didn't want brown babies in the neighborhood. And I didn't understand it because my dad, like being from Jamaica, everyone is Jamaican. It doesn't matter what you look like. And it was like he'd always tell me like they're your family. Like everyone in Jamaica could be your family. And it actually is true. Like I have so much family there that I walk down the street, they're like, hey, I'm your cousin. I'm like, really? But it was weird for like my dad to instill that in me and teach me all those things, and then see someone be like, I don't want your kids to be brown. And so like that was, and I was really little, so I still didn't really understand it. But my parents like tried to explain it to me, and my dad didn't even, that was his first experience, I would say, truthfully, because he grew up in a place where everyone looked like him. And so he was like, I don't understand that, you know? So.
Thank you for sharing those experiences. I feel like I get this question a lot, so I'm really curious to hear how you all answer it. What is the difference between race and ethnicity?
I feel like race is seen more as like the phenotype of how we identify ourselves, or kind of like hair or skin color, whereas ethnicity is kind of more of a cultural, it's kind of like what you have inside, whether it can be like religion or how you practice holidays or certain traditions that you have from your ancestors, like home countries. So it's important to recognize, I feel like, the difference between the two, although they do overlap at times. However, like they're two completely different things.
That was a really good answer. I think I'm gonna need you to come lead some workshops. So, how would they like to be called without being offensive? Black, African American, African American, etc.?
Something we were talking about, like, before we started filming, was I'm English, if you couldn't tell by my accent. And since I've been in America, people have referred to me as African American, like, a lot. And I think a lot of people, like, they don't like to use the word black, or they're not sure, like, what the, like, PC or the correct way to refer to someone that looks like me is. But I'm definitely not African American, you know, I'm not from America, you know, I am half Nigerian and I'm half British, so I'm, you know, if you were to use that, I suppose British African, but it's just funny to me that people, like, the first thing to go to is African American when that's one thing I definitely am not.
Me and Andrea were talking about it earlier too, that like you said, like, some people kind of look at saying, like, oh, are you black, like, as a dirty word. And I'm like, it's not a dirty word, and it's not a bad thing to say, like, oh, are you black? Like, I'll be like, yes, I'm black. But it's funny because I think, like, from several workshops I've worked on, we actually talk about this a lot, that, like, saying, like, comparing me and Dada, we're both black, but we're not both African American. I was like, my family and my heritage comes from Jamaica. And so, like, I wouldn't say that I'm African American, even though I was born in America, because it's just, like, that's not where my family came from. And so, like, in my case, I prefer to be just called black. And I'm, like, fine with being called black, even though sometimes it kind of is funny when people, like, are talking to you and then they're like, oh, like, African American. And I'm like,
yeah, people think it's polite to use African American.
I'm like,
it's just the incorrect term.
Yeah, I was like,
It's like a catch-all.
Yeah, and it kind of sometimes it can rub you a little bit that you're like, it's like, it's okay, like, but then it just feels like kind of awkward because it's like, I know you're trying to be, like, polite, then, like, I understand that, so I won't, like, call a person after, like, you called me African American, like, no. But, like, me and Daughter were talking about that, like, sometimes you really can just ask a person, like, you can ask them, like, where is your family from, like, what would you prefer to be called? It's similar, like, with pronouns. Like, it's polite to ask people, like, would you prefer to be called she or her? Like, that would be my answer for that question.
Yeah, I think to sum it up, you said it best. Ask.
Yeah.
Like, if it's your friend, your teammate, someone that you're getting to know, you can just ask what they prefer to be called. All right, so let's move on to our next question. How is the Lobo community actively showing their support for the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I think, like, as part of this committee that we're on, we've been trying really hard to spearhead, like, movements to get going and, like, initiate conversations like this. This is a great opportunity we're talking about it, but also share with our community so they can start conversations with their friends and families about the same things. But of course, COVID has been kind of difficult in the sense that we don't want to try and get our message out, but then detrimentally affect, like, all of the progress that New Mexico has made with, like, keeping COVID safe. So we had loads of ideas and loads of plans and, like, lots of things to start doing back, you know, when this all started, that unfortunately all had to be moved virtually, or, you know, other than the chalk event, which was really cool, but we couldn't have as many people there as we wanted. But yeah, I think as a committee, we're trying really hard to at least get a conversation, like, continue the conversation. It's already started. BLM, like, when that started in June, that really, like, kick-started a conversation, but now we have to maintain that conversation, like, keep talking about it. It doesn't go on for a month and then end, or then restart again when the next black man is shot. Like, that's, or, you know, whatever, that's not how we're hoping to keep things going.
I would also say, like, the communities that are on campus as well. Like, African American Studies, I've worked really closely with Brandy Stone, and even, like, ASUNM, I think that you guys help us a lot too. Like, I think that UNM as a whole has been working really hard on, like, the inclusivity and diversity, unity. Yeah, I've been really proud to, like, be part of the Lobo community because it's pretty special. A lot of schools, like, don't get this chance to actually unify their school together. And I've even talked with some students from other sports within our conference, and they've had a really hard time getting their school
getting the
unified.
conversation going. Yeah.
And it was interesting when I was, like, asked, like, when we're all asked how are your schools doing with it, I'm like, I love my school. I'm like, I appreciate, like, Eddie so much for everything that he, like, me and Dad are like, hey, Eddie, we want to do this. He's like, yes. And, like, we've been told no only because of COVID. Like most of the time he supports us. And like I feel support from everybody, whereas like other schools don't get that.
Yeah, I don't worry at all about not having my voice heard, which
Yeah.
is really cool to have at our school.
I think one other thing that you all have done a really good job of as a committee on the student side is sharing resources too. I think, you know, you all post on social media a lot, our little Instagram. And I think that is one way to stay actively involved in this day and time where we can't always be face to face or in the same room. Sharing resources where people can watch a video in their own time or read an article or that sort of thing is super important as well. So kudos to you all. Our next question, I want to support my Black friend, but I do not support everything that Black Lives Matter stands for. What should I do?
I think first you have to recognize that your friend is your friend before any like political or social affiliation. Like you should be looking at your friend as your friend, not as a representation of BLM. Of course, like if they're your friend, you should understand that, you know, they maybe have different struggles than you do based on their race or their gender or whatever the issue is. But specifically talking, you know, you want to support your Black friend, but you don't support BLM, or maybe you should reevaluate the friendship that you have. Like with all my friends anyway, like I'm very concerned with their well-being as they are with mine, and BLM is something that you can't escape. If you're Black, then, you know, you don't just get to decide to be Black one day and not Black the next day. Like that's something that you're dealing with every day. And I think you should maybe have a conversation with your friend if that's something you really can't get behind, you know?
Yeah. I think a big thing is also understanding that you don't understand. Because I think a lot of people will say, oh, because I'm this race, I do deal with it too, kind of like diminishing one person's struggle. And I think amplifying their voices and listening rather than saying, well, I think that was the biggest struggle. And also the biggest improvement is a lot of people started listening instead of saying what they think.
That is a key. Another thing that I would add, a lot of times I think people forget that, you know, Black Lives Matter is, you know, it's an organization and they have their goals and they have their missions. And, you know, some of those are really, really progressive things. But the fight for equality started long before Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So supporting your friend in the fight towards racial justice and racial equality doesn't have to be tied to Black Lives Matter. Is the one thing that I try and kind of reiterate to people as well. All right, well, thank you for your time. We'll continue the conversation in our next episode of Social Justice Talks.